Indonesian dreams. All the people that studied abroad and all people that work abroad from Silicon Valley, Europe, and Australia, they came home. They returned home to make themselves, a billionaire. And it's really happening in this part of the world. Yeah? Me, myself included. I lived in the US for almost a dozen years. I never believed that Southeast Asia will become something like a behemoth like this. Yeah? This caused by, again, our young demographics. If you read a report on Indonesia and on the economic report on Indonesia, you see that we have the demographic bonus, yeah? And the rise of the middle class, that really become the key driver to this digital growth. Yeah? But Indonesia's traditional companies, the conglomerates that had enjoyed monopolistic treatment by the government, not ready for this. When Gojek, Grab, and Uber, from the other part of the world, came to Indonesia, it really disrupted their market share. Yeah? So as you can see, this is not something that to be proud of, but taxi drivers turning violent, yeah? Or rickshaw drivers turning violent, against his online counterparts. I mean, can you imagine that? I mean, that's even insane to begin with, because most of taxi cab drivers, rickshaw drivers, they are the most peaceful people in the world, So Indonesia's corporate is not ready for this. The people is not ready for this. The ecosystem, this phenomenon that's happening, that makes, people like us, in the tech industries, feel confused, of what's happening. So this is 2016. People are rallying up, against this online, they against Uber, they against Gojek. They want to kill the Gojek driver. Can you believe that? I mean, if ever a Gojek driver came down to the alley, when there's the sign "No Gojek allowed," they'll probably beat him to death. That's as insane as it is, but this disruption is real. Telkom Indonesia blocked Netflix. This tells us that disruptions can come from anywhere. Disruptions know no boundaries. Yeah? But we can always use VPN, right? So we have Netflix block. We have 2016. We have Gojek driver ban, from certain streets and alleys. Yeah? But then again, progress always wins. Just recently, Gojek, being the most valuable company coming from Indonesia, worth $8 billion right now, started off their expansion to Southeast Asia. This has just come recently. This is like last month, this news. They start expanding into Vietnam by the new brand of apparently Go Viet, yeah, and Thailand. This is the first two of their expansion plan to dominate the world. Yeah. Singapore, Malaysia, and the Philippines won't stand a chance. Won't stand a chance. So what spiked this tech boom in Indonesia? Well, apparently, like I mentioned earlier, the Americans came, the Americans experimented with the kind of model, invested in social media, in something that they can relate to, because most of the tech giants in the US based on the advertising. But I think the Chinese gets it. The Chinese invested in something that very related to them, which is to build a value-added service on top of the e-commerce. Yeah. I think that's pretty similar to India as well. Yeah. Because Indonesia or Southeast Asia media is not as fragmented as the US. It's really owned by a few conglomerates. That makes the Google of the world, you know, when they start investing in the media in Indonesia, it won't take off, you know, because all the media are owned by either state or families. But e-commerce is a different story. Nobody paid attention to this. So the Chinese came in hard and heavy, investing in Gojek, Grab, Bukalapak, Lazada, Garena, now SEA. And they've been successfully building their own consolidation play. If you can see this map, this is really a different format than what I have in my laptop. So if you can see, Tencent, Alibaba has been dominating all the play, partnering up with local conglomerates like Jarum, Lipo Group, North Stars. Yeah. And followed by, again, Google. Google just came in last month, investing in JD.com. And through JD.com, they own JDID, which is one of the big behemoths in Indonesia e-commerce. Yeah. Yeah. Toyota coming in, investing in Grab for Southeast Asia. Yeah. We heard rumors of Amazon. I know that you guys have Amazon here in India. But the rumors that we've heard, you know, that Amazon has yet to unveil their plan to dominate Southeast Asia. Right now, they're setting up the fulfillment center in Singapore. Nothing more. But when Amazon coming into this ecosystem, it will be very interesting to follow in the next couple of years. Yeah. So what corporates do about it? You know, again, all this disruption is really bothering corporations all around the world. And especially in Indonesia, when they have, again, the monopolistic treatment by the government. Yeah. If you can see here from the slide, we have, I think, Temasek, the holding of Singapore companies owned by the government. They are the first to invest in tech startups since 1997. With 300 investments and 60 exits, they are clearly the winner in this ecosystem, right? And followed by our evil twin, Singtel, Innovate. They started 5 years earlier than us. With a fund size of 330 million, 80 investment and 30 exits, they are definitely catching up. So when I was about, you know, when I craft this slide over here, in Indonesia, everything started off with the families. Yeah. I guess the family conglomerate like Jarum, you know, which is they own the largest tobacco company in Indonesia and one of the largest consumer banks in Indonesia. Their second or third generations, they started off with a venture fund. Yeah. So this is kind of interesting to see, you know, how they started off the entire industry just because they have the money and they have the exposure during the dot-com boom and bust in the 90s. Yeah. We came on later. I mean, MDI, that's our company, MDI, started with telecom. We started off in 2015. Yeah. And Mandiri Capital, another state-owned bank, started off this fintech investment. And Central Capital, which is owned by Jarum as well, started off the fintech investment in Indonesia. Yeah. And we are seeing more corporates jumping into this bandwagon. We are seeing many of the state-owned companies are jumping into tech. I was asked earlier outside, is there any other sector in Indonesia that is non-tech? My answer would be no. Second will be infrastructures, definitely. But tech is related to Indonesians. So it's just a matter of time until all corporates all over Indonesia started to adopt corporate fund. So this is MDI Ventures in a snapshot. I was invited by Telkom Indonesia to join. In fact, we are the experimental company of Telkom, because we are the only telecom companies, telecom subsidiaries, that only have 4 telecom employees out of 25. And those telecom employees are only doing legal and compliance. So we are like the experiments for Telkom Indonesia. Yeah. So MDI Ventures, we invested in more than 10 countries, over 8 tech verticals. We have ad tech into space tech. You know, that's how big the spectrum that what we invested in. Yeah. Our investment has to be synergistic or strategic to Telkom as a corporate plan. You know, we cannot just invest something that is really have nothing to do with telco. So it has to be something of telco related. But since we don't have a benchmark on corporate venturing, and MDI is the biggest and currently the biggest fund in Indonesia, biggest corporate fund in Indonesia, we set up the benchmark. We helped out to those corporates that about to embrace the tech sectors. We help with Bank Mandiri with their digital incubator. We assist BRI with their digital excellence initiatives. And I think what we do differently than any corporate investors, that we bridge Silicon Valley and Indonesia together. You know, because as you know, in the venture investment, everything's all about risk. Yeah. And if we connect to top-tier global investors, we can reduce those risks. So we co-invested with Google Ventures, Bain Capital, SoftBank, NEA, Menlo Ventures, even our evil twin, Singtel, Innovate, and Telstra Ventures. Yeah. Just to jump up the ecosystem, you know. So this is a snapshot of MDI Ventures. Like I mentioned earlier, the essence of what we do is to build collaborations. This is an article I took from Fortune magazine, quite recently in the US, you know. Why corporations are so bad working with startups? Because corporations are getting used to vendors. You know. When they see startups, they see vendors. When they see startups, they see someone that could do their homework, you know. And startup is not about that, you know. I know that telco people, you know, corporate people, telco people, you know, in my context, have no time for chit-chat. Startup founders have no patience to wait for corporate people to take the lead. Yeah. So this is, you know, what they wrote in the Fortune magazine is 100% right. We experienced it early in our model, you know, along with the 30 companies that we invested in. Nobody want to talk to corporate people, and corporate people think the startup founders are arrogant. Yeah. Arrogant because they don't want to do their job, you know, the corporate homework. Yeah. Yeah. No, but we, after 4 years, you know, entering 4 years right now, we made it an impact. We built a new revenue streams for Telkom Indonesia. We built a cost-saving initiatives through the startups, you know. So this is something that we think relevant to what we do. And we are the only corporate ventures that are doing this. Yeah. We do beyond investment. Oh, sorry, this is an old slide. But what we do is collaborating with startups more, and we are investors. But most of the success of the collaborations are, credit to these founders. Out of 30 companies that we invested in, 8 companies come from Indian diaspora. Yeah. And the reason why I'm here today, because I want to see the Indian startup ecosystem up close. I invested in Indian diaspora, an Indian who live in the US, an Indian who live in Singapore. Yeah. But MDI Ventures has never made an investment based here in India. So this is what we are looking for. This is the diversity of our corporate investment in startups. It's huge. And chemistry matters the most. We encourage those CEOs and founders to come to talk to Telkom, even they don't have business to do with, just sitting down, having a coffee, not beer, because beer will not be halal, but building the chemistry. So we are matchmaker first, then we are investors. So that's the deal. Hey, matchmaker. So entering our 4th year, we have 1 IPO in Japan, we have 1 trade sale, and we are heavily audited. We have 20% of annual return. But the most important thing is that we need to keep the entrepreneurial spirit alive, especially in corporate settings. I think this is what I want to share. I know some of you have a corporate background. Corporate and entrepreneurship, it doesn't match. Oh, okay. Yeah. From time to time. Yeah. So what we need to do is to embrace all those two together. Yeah. I want to share a bit, but I guess she pointed the time is out. Our commitment to Indonesia ecosystem, is the most important part in our job. So we invited those investors from anywhere in the world to invest in Indonesian startups. We have the most successful accelerator program in Indonesia. We are not investing global, but we're taking our local startup to global. This is one of the startups that we are proud of, PayFast, invested by Y Combinator based in Silicon Valley and Vertex Ventures in Singapore. Yeah. So this is the last slide that I have, and we can have a bit of Q&A after this. Limit to 3, I guess. So what we do as a corporate ventures is that we are nurturing the ecosystem as a whole. We have to advise investment community of this unicorn's frenzy. There's a lot of misinformation and a lot of noises right there. So we need to build, a meaningful network to Indonesian investors. We need to educate startup community to understand the real metrics. Yeah. And last but not least, corporate community. Corporate community is the last to know. And when they are the last to know, they're into a fear of missing out. They just do whatever they can just to be in the scene. Yeah. So this, I guess, everywhere in the world, these 3 key stakeholders need to be maintained in order to build a sustainable tech ecosystem. Thank you. I hope you have a good time. Thank you. Will be Q&A? No? Okay.
Thank you so much, sir. It was such a pleasure listening to you. Ladies and gentlemen, please give it up for Mr. Nicko. I request Ms. Maria to please join us on stage to do the honors. So thank you so much for your time.